The committee has considered the Financial Service Providers Pre-Implementation Adjustments Bill and reports it with amendment and divided into the following bills. Financial Advisors Amendment Bill Number 2, Financial Service Providers Registration and Disputes Resolution Amendment Bill. Mr. Speaker, I move that the report be adopted.
The question is that the report be adopted. Those of that opinion will say aye. Contrary, no. The ayes have it. The bills are set down for third reading forthwith. Honourable Pansy Wong.
Mr. Speaker, I move that the Financial Service Providers Pre-Implementation Adjustment Bill be now read a third time. Mr. Speaker, I just want to acknowledge the cooperation of all parties in the House, because we all want to ensure confidence restored in our financial market, and that is a step towards that. This bill makes a number of amendments to the Financial Advisors Act and the Financial Service Providers Act, which were passed in 2008 by the previous government to increase confidence in New Zealand's financial system. Under the regime, financial advisors have to meet minimum standards of professionalism and have to make informative disclosure to clients while being subject to Securities Commission oversight. Furthermore, all financial service providers, including financial advisors, are required to belong to an approved dispute resolution scheme if they offer services to the public. The bill maintains the fundamental framework of registered advisors, authorized advisors, and qualifying financial entities established by the two primary acts. However, this amendment bill reduces compliance costs and focuses the regime on the core area of concern, personalized financial advice to retail clients. Compliance costs are reduced under this bill by clarifying key terms and requirements. Exemption and regulation making powers are expanded, and the qualifying financial entity model is amended to account for the realities of business operations. The Financial Advisors Act is also amended to establish a practical regime for the regulation of money handling by financial brokers. These changes respond to concerns raised in the past 2 years about the practicalities of making the regime work as we approach full implementation. Regulatory efficiency is vitally important, but as I have consistently stated, this regime is about restoring investor and consumer confidence. To this end, the bill expands the powers of the Securities Commission so that it can more effectively perform its duties in the specific ambit of personalized services to retail clients. I would like to thank the Commerce Select Committee, officials, and the wider industry for engaging so conscientiously on this bill. The next step is implementation, and I expect the industry to engage constructively with regulators to ensure that the regime is fully in place on time. I also expect my officials to complete the regulations needed to finalize the remaining details in a timely fashion. As I have previously announced, financial service providers will need to be registered under the Financial Service Providers Act and become a member of an approved dispute resolution scheme by 1 December of this year. Financial advisors, however, have until March 31st next year to be registered, allowing those seeking approval from the Securities Commission for authorization status to obtain the necessary approval by 1 July next year. The government recognizes that it needs to rebuild mom-and-dad investors' trust in capital markets, which has been severely dented by the global recession and finance company collapses. We want everyday investors to feel more confident about putting their savings into capital markets through understanding the basics of investment, getting advice they can trust, and making informed choices. This regime is an important part of the wide-ranging reform agenda for financial sector regulation, which is crucial to economic growth and the well-being of New Zealanders. I commend this bill to the House.
The question is that the motion be agreed to. Honourable Leanne Dalziel.
Speaker, I'm very pleased to follow the Minister and offer our continuing support for the passage of the Financial Service Providers Pre-Implementation Adjustments Bill. I'm very pleased to have been able to play a role as the Chair of the Select Committee and to work very closely with members of the Government and also with the Minister and staff of his office, and also with officials, Parliamentary Council, and of course those all-important stakeholders who make up our crucial financial sector, which is so important to our economic recovery and also our future. I have it's already said in my second reading speech, so I probably don't need to repeat it, but I'm going to, because I just think that people work together in such a positive and constructive way that it would be wrong not to mention it again, and to pay tribute to the House that was prepared to set aside essentially a standing order to allow for the officials' documentation to go to stakeholders so that they could remain in an engaged process of, basically deliberating with the committee in many respects, ensuring that we had the best quality advice in terms of how this legislation would work on the ground. I think it was a fantastic signal of trust that the House gave to our committee, but I would actually like us to think about maybe whether we need to rethink some of our standing orders and whether we do have too much of a closed environment once legislation goes to a select committee. I reflect often on the United States of America, and you get the head of BP in front of a House committee or a Senate committee and they get grilled, and you just think, gosh, I'd like to do that with some of these finance company directors. It would be just so neat to be able to hold them to account in our Parliament. And maybe we do need to have a slightly more open process in our select committees, and perhaps the media need to take a little bit more interest in the work that we're doing, because it is, I've always described our select committees as the engine room of Parliament. They're not the engine room of government, that's your cabinet, but the engine room of Parliament. And I think it is important, the work that they do. And this bill, I think, stands tribute to the efforts of our team that supported us in our select committee clerks, and I'd like the Office of the Clerk to take that back. We really were incredibly well supported. We worked to impossible deadlines and they really did deliver for us, so we're very grateful to them for that, and also to the officials, as I've mentioned before, and the wider stakeholders. And I guess as a former minister, and I've already had my little confession moment as mea culpa, where I've confessed that as a minister I did not have my head around the technical detail of how the legislation that I was responsible for would work on the ground, as well as I do now as the Select Committee Chair. And I think Select Committees members are in a privileged position in that they do get a higher level of input into the development of that technical detail, and of course they have that wider support from stakeholders. And I don't know that this is a failing in the system, because certainly the feedback that I got from those that I spoke to was that you really couldn't tell how it was going to work in practice until you started implementing the legislation. And it was during that phase that people started to go, well, actually, this bill that the government's introduced doesn't actually go far enough and doesn't address many of the concerns that we have and the difficulties that we're coming up against in terms of the implementation. And of course the other group, and I know that I shouldn't be saying this standing next to my very good colleague Charles Chauvel, but lawyers